Glenn, thanks for joining me on the floor at Mid 2025.
Thank you, Joe. Great to
You
be
and
here.
I have been, as part of HSMG Advisors, we have been putting together a CEO playbook, a white paper, if you will. Is that the way you would explain it?
Yeah, but it's also it's a body of knowledge, and it's a way to start to frame intelligent conversations with really high-performing individuals.
And we ideated this, yourself, myself, Rick, Bernie, the founders of HSMG, because we thought that it wasn't clear what the characteristics, skill sets were of the A plus versus the A CEOs. And you found out some very important, unique, maybe surprising things. And we interviewed, we don't necessarily have to drop the names here, but it'll be in the report. You interviewed some of the heavy hitters.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we interviewed people who have, been part of 20 successful companies who've invested in, a whole portfolio. They've been on multiple boards. So these are people who've really seen it all. They've seen the good and the bad. And, one of the characteristics that came out, which was kind of a surprise to me, is that self-awareness was one of the most repeated characteristic that they said is critical for a CEO to be successful. And I think you see most CEOs as being highly confident individuals, so finding that balance between vulnerability and being self-aware and being confident at the same time is really takes great skill and maturity to do that well.
And what was number two? I want to dig into the self-awareness, and I have some some thesis around that, but what came up as number two?
Number two was thinking ahead. So it's really about when you're doing the trial design and you're coming up with your regulatory strategy, it's thinking about, okay, what do we need to do in commercialization? So what data do we need to collect to make sure we're designing this whole process to be able to set us up for success? So it's thinking about the next funding raise. If I'm raising Series A right now, what am I going to need when I get to Series C? So always thinking multiple chess moves ahead.
What also was interesting on using an example A to C round or to get to C, the self-awareness comes in there. Sometimes the best CEOs, and I've seen this from my seat, put up their hand and say, listen, I'm not the person to take you from B to C.
Yeah.
And usually that's a founder who has that self-awareness and wants to see this continue to have an ascending trajectory to it.
Yeah, we heard that a lot. We heard that people often self-select. They say, I'm not the right person. I'll help you find and I'll help transition to the right person. But I've also heard people who've been, again, serial board members say, I've helped people make that transition. So their self-awareness that they may not have the right skills and capabilities, the board can sometimes help coach that individual to make that transition, and supplemented with the right leadership team there, you can often complement the skills so that collectively they have what it takes to be successful.
A good board will do that. They'll find that gap, determine if it's, well, how will we say it? Is it terminal or not? The lack of that skill or underperformance in it, and does it make sense to stand them up? Well, let's talk about coaching and a staff for a second. Here's what I found just absolutely mind-bending around medical device, is we've got $100 million, $200 million investments going out, investing always in the CEO. Then we've got boards who aren't quite the operators that when you and I grew up in Medtech 20, 25 years ago, previous operators usually sat on boards. Today, boards are more around the VC and the investment community who wrote a check, get on the board. Don't necessarily, majority don't have operating experience.
Right.
Yet, we don't give the permission nor the resources to the CEO to have a coaching staff outside the board in order to either have a shoulder to lean on, because they are human, a gap in their game they need to decode on how to get there, and you're talking about a minimal investment of time and finances in order to backstop that possibility of a coaching staff. Did you dig into that at all with some of the interviews?
We didn't dig into that as much. I think that there certainly were conversations where people said that being vulnerable, sometimes you don't get the personalities on the board that allow you to be vulnerable. And so it takes both the right board and the right CEO in order to make that chemistry work, where you really can have that vulnerable discussion and a really constructive coaching environment. So even in the best of situations, though, it's sometimes hard to get authentic feedback from people, from the leadership team or from the board, and that's where an objective third party can be really helpful. The other thing that we found too is that one of the things we're going to do is offer a CEO lab, or an afternoon or a chunk of the day where we're really immersed in laying out what are your aspirations and goals, what are your key priorities and your roadblocks, how's your team, what are your key challenges with communication with stakeholders, and how do we comprise a 180-day plan that's really going to get you where you need to be. And to spend quality time like that on the CEO's agenda is a very privileged thing to do, because CEOs are busy, they're fighting fires constantly, and so to be able to step back and have that opportunity to just work on their game, frankly, helps the whole company, but it's also just not something that they often get to do on their own, and so we think that that's important to offer that, and we think it's an important investment in time for them to make for, again, they're good and the company's good at the same time too.
This report right now is being baked. You're in the midst of it with the team. When can we expect to potentially see a published white paper out on this?
I'm hoping next month. So we're drafting it this month, and so we should be ready to go live next month.
Sometime
now,
in November.
In November. And in addition to that, though, we're going to do a survey too. So we're going to poll hundreds of investors and ask them to start to quantify some of what we've learned in these interviews, and that's going to be really interesting to get out to the marketplace too.
So we're going to take the dozen interviews or so we had with these very high level, super successful CEOs in Medtech,
Yep.
and then you're going to break those down on characteristics, skills, experiences,
Yep.
and then we're going to push that poll out to a few hundred VCs as well as other leaders in the industry and get that data back.
Exactly.
What some other features that you found out of there that came out of the conversations?
I was really surprised that when we asked our interviewees, what are the key decisions the CEO needs to make effectively and on a timely basis? And in vast majority of cases, they only gave one response, and it was people decisions. It was hire, fire decisions. And so in the end, what our interviewees were saying is that the number one job for a CEO is to hire the best team and the right team for that company in that time. So maybe they had a great team in their last company and they want to pull them all over, but it may not be that the same individuals that worked in that last company are going to work in this setting, in this situation, because every company is different. So that was a surprise finding, and I think that we all say we tend to hire fast and fire slow. That's right. And so that's a very important area of focus for a CEO to be successful.
You also mentioned there was some discussion around strategy and operations.
Yeah, I think most CEOs, because they have to wear many hats, in particular have to balance that, how much do I spend on strategy and how much do I spend on execution, operations, whatever you want to call it. And so we asked all our interviewees, what do you think about that? And the interesting finding is that there was not as much consistency on that one. So I conclude from that, if I'm a CEO, I really have to know my board members, because it could be that some of the boards are going to think it's more important to emphasize strategy and others are going to think it's more important to emphasize operations. Clearly you got to do both. And then, the second conclusion is that everybody said executing in the end is what's going to make or break the company. And so that's where getting alignment in the organization and a real management system in place makes the job of the CEO, you could say, simple, not necessarily easy, but simpler when you have that system in place.
As you're sharing these insights with me, what I see when we all ideated this, all the principles of HSMG, I think this is going to be a Bible for CEOs on how to manage up to their boards and think about the key skills, characteristics that they need to flex, be aware of, or fill the gaps in on. As much as it is on, oh gee, we want to know what we should be hiring, I think the CEOs here should be, let me know what I need to demonstrate competently and excel at back up to my investors.
Absolutely.
Well, Glenn, appreciate it. We'll continue to talk around this subject as this gets to see the light of day, but appreciate the efforts.
All right, Joe, thanks for having me.
Thanks. I'm Joe Mullings from the floor of Medtech Conference, San Diego, 2025. Be well.